Hello and welcome to the next episode of Mental Health and Wellbeing in COVID-19, our webinar series aimed at helping you with your mental health and your well-being during this time. My name is Theron Nightenfit. I have my colleague Mark Baker here.
So great to be with you again. Let's jump in, Theron.
Let's jump straight in. Okay, so the episode that we are speaking about today is how to create relationships, digital and in person, that build you up. Very exciting. We're going to be talking about a couple of themes today that I find very interesting. But before we do, let's just do a bit of a recap. In the previous webinar, we looked at how your mind creates unhelpful thought patterns. And we talked about how these shifting, problematic thoughts can actually kill your well-being and really just have an impact in your mental health and your social relational health as well. And then we gave you a couple of techniques and we rehashed a few things from the past to be able to actually change that internal narrative. The key question we asked was, how do we change these unhelpful thought patterns? And of course, we looked at a couple of techniques as to how to do that. Today, we are continuing the theme with narrative, but we'll get there in a second. We're looking at how do you create relationships that build you up. We're going to be looking at two very helpful constructs, the drama triangle and the TED, and how that the TED in particular can help us in dealing and just give us some really practical ways of dealing with relationships that are tough so that we can move towards healthy relational interactions and behaviors. Okay, Mark, the drama triangle, Stephen Karpman, 1966. What's this all about?
Yeah, I mean, Theron, I'm just aware again, we've got 20 minutes or half an hour in this webinar to talk about building healthy relationships. Of course, that's impossible. But this drama triangle is really a powerful mechanism to help us understand what unhealthy relationships look like. And so it comes from Stephen Karpman. The drama triangle comes literally out of his history in drama and looking at the scripts, literally the story that gets written to create a drama. And he suggested that in any story, both the life story of an individual, but also in the moment-by-moment story that unfolds, there is a drama that seems to play itself out with different characters that take on different roles. And what he suggested is that every drama is made up of three different kinds of characters. There is a persecutor, there is a rescuer, and there is a victim. And of course, the persecutor is persecuting the victim. The rescuer is trying to rescue the victim. And so this victim is seen as the one down position, and the persecutor and rescuer are seen as the one up positions. What's key for us to understand here is that this comes out of that transactional analysis theory, where we're able to look at the way we're interacting with others, analyze those transactions, and try and make some adjustments so that we can make them slightly healthier. And so what I think is really helpful for us to see is that drama intensifies when there is a switch in the roles. And the best way of looking at that, I think, is to talk through an actual story. And so, Theron, I'd love to throw the ball to you because I think you're particularly good at stories. So why don't you take it from here and just talk us through a script of a story and show us how these different roles interact as drama unfolds in any relational dynamic.
Well, this is actually, as you mentioned already, Stephen Karpman, when he worked out this sort of construct and this idea, he drew on fairy tales quite a lot. And one of the preliminary fairy tales he uses is the story of Little Red Riding Hood. Of course, there are a number of different characters. There's the woodsman, there's Little Red Riding Hood herself, the wolf, and the grandmother. Now, if you look at this, you say, who's the victim in the story? Well, Little Red Riding Hood, or maybe the grandmother. Who's the rescuer? Well, I don't know, the woodsman. You know, if you look at it at face value, you think you understand what's going on. What Karpman does for us is unpack this in a blow-by-blow as the story goes to show us how these roles shift, how people take on different characters, other characters take on different roles. So let's dive in right at the beginning. Okay, the first part of the story is we have a victim. The grandmother, she's old and frail and she's at home and she needs rescuing. A bit of a stretch here, but she needs rescuing. And her granddaughter, Little Red Riding Hood, comes along with some freshly baked cookies or muffins to come and be the rescuer, to come and offer visitation or community to her grandmother, who is the victim of the story, stuck at home in the woods in her little cottage. First rescuer, Little Red Riding Hood. First victim, the grandmother. On the way, of course, we know she meets the wolf, who we don't know yet, but is going to become the first persecutor. By the time Little Red Riding Hood gets to the grandmother's house, the wolf has already gobbled up that first victim, the grandmother. And Little Red Riding Hood shifts from being a rescuer into being a victim. She becomes the story's second victim. Still to the persecutor, the wolf, who's the first persecutor. As he's about to gobble her up, It's time for another shift in the drama. What happens? Oh, a woodsman arrives, the story's second rescuer. He's now going to be rescuer to the story's second victim, Little Red Riding Hood. But the way in which he rescues Little Red Riding Hood is by becoming a persecutor to the story's third victim, the wolf. Can you see how each of these characters shifts into different spaces as the plot unfolds? And Cartman's point is that in drama, or in story, the drama happens when these roles switch, when they change. And I think the reason a story like Little Red Riding Hood is one that has stood the test of time is because it speaks to us. In fact, anyone who comes from the literary world or story or film or anything from the kind of world I'm from, they'll all tell you the same thing, that stories resonate with us because they speak to our lived experience. We each, in our own life stories, we have these examples of how we shift from persecutor to victim to rescuer. There are shifts. We are not simple characters in life. We are characters that shift back and forth. If you think of a classic argument between a mother and her child who's being disobedient, and the child's the victim and the mother is the persecutor, and then the father comes in and starts telling the mom she's being too harsh, and the father comes to the rescue of that child, but does it by persecuting the way the mother is trying to parent, and then the mother becomes the victim. Well, you're never around, I'm going to take it all on myself. You can see how this plays out in life, and this problem is a problem that we experience in life, falling into these roles. One of the things Cartman stresses quite a bit is that when you take on a role, you extend an invitation to another character to play the complementary role. If I'm going to be a victim in life and I can't do it, I invite someone around me to come and be my rescuer. If I'm going to lash out and be abusive, I'm inviting that person to just be a victim. And so often what happens is we default into those responses. And we enable things. Mark, tell us a little bit more about this problem and this whole concept of enabling.
Yeah, I mean, Theron, you're absolutely spot on, and something that you brought to mind for me was what has been, for me, quite transformative about understanding this drama triangle in my own life, which is this whole concept of putting out an offer and taking on a role in response to the offer that another role puts out. Because I have very much through the course of my life taken on the rescuer role in many instances, and yet this model, this drama triangle, doesn't only apply to the script of one's whole life, but also can apply to specific moments in different scenarios. And so where this concept of enabling comes from is that when I am constantly the rescuer in a relationship and someone else is constantly the victim, it can create a codependent relationship where the person is left in a position of being a victim because, of course, I would keep rescuing them. And something that Cartman shares at some point in his writings there, and that I found profound, is that every one of these characters ultimately ends up as the victim. Because ultimately, even the rescuer, which is what has been my primary role in many relational contexts, will end up getting fed up and saying, well, why aren't you guys helping? Why aren't you doing it? Going into persecutor. And ultimately then, and you can see me going from rescuer to persecutor to victim, ultimately going, well, you know what, you never help me. I'm just in a terrible marriage, or I'm in a terrible friendship, or woe is me. And so when we get caught into this drama triangle, it really can lead to codependent and unhealthy ways of being. And of course, the key is not for us to just analyze the drama, Theron, but of course, we have to know how to end the drama. How do we break out of the drama? And so,
before we get there,
go for it.
Before we get there, it's coming with the lens of story as a story man myself.
Yeah.
What's so interesting in story, and fiction is a great place to start, is the context. When the context shifts, it puts extra pressure on those characters. So the plot is not just about the characters. The plot actually encompasses other things. We're barely holding on, and now a thunderstorm arrives or a blizzard, and everything gets worse. And how insightful is that for this moment right now? We may be in these kind of relationships with people around us, and all of a sudden we're hit with lockdown, or we're hit with a whole, everything that we knew as normal has been thrown out the window. And the context itself can really add pressure. It's like a pressure pot to some of these relational dynamics. So, okay, that's the problem. That's the context. What's the solution, Mark?
Yeah, well, I mean, the solution is very simple to put on a slide and a drawing. but obviously, much more difficult to implement. But let's talk about the solution. These guys came up with this what's called the empowerment dynamic, Emerald and Jonk. And I find it very helpful because they suggest, instead of putting out an offer to take on a role in the drama triangle, what we can do as individuals is we can learn and grow and cause ourselves consciously to take on roles that are the equivalent but opposite roles of the drama triangle. And these opposite roles are the one at the top is the creator. And we'll talk about each one of these just briefly, but the creator is a role that one can take on instead of taking on the role of the victim. So instead of being a victim, a creator would have a role or a perspective. They would take on a lens. I mean, Theron, this is all the stuff we've been talking about through this webinar series. But the creator takes on that perspective of, I am sufficient and whole and complete. I'm not a victim that needs to be rescued, or I'm not a victim that's been persecuted. That's drama triangle. But the empowerment dynamic is where the creator says, I'm sufficient, whole, and complete. I'm responsible for choosing my responses in life. I have agency, and I can focus on learning and improving even when faced with struggles and setbacks. So this creator role is essentially a mindset that we take on so that we can build the empowerment dynamic. I don't know if you want to just add anything there, Theron.
Yeah, what we didn't make explicit is that this empowerment dynamic is a flipped drama triangle. It is the whole thing inverted. So in the past, the persecutor and the rescuer both had power over a victim. Now, what we're saying by this way up is that actually the creator has their own power, their own agency. They can take this moment of COVID and they can say, no, I'm going to make it a time of growth, which is essentially, what we've been arguing for in this webinar series. They have their own personal power. They're on an upward spiral. They're growing their resources. Speak to us about the coach. Why do we have a little caddy there as the icon?
Yeah, well, I mean, the caddy is so often giving input that is inspiring someone else for their own agency. And so the coach, the mindset or the perspective, the role that the coach takes on in the empowerment dynamic is that they have faith in the wisdom that lies within someone else, and of course in this instance it would be the creator. So they believe in what's inside the other creator. From one of our previous episodes, that might be saying, you know what, you actually have 86 billion laptops between your ears. I'm pretty sure you can do it. Come on. And then
so the coach is instead of the rescuer.
Yes.
So the rescuer says, you can't do it, I'm going to do it for you. The coach says, you do it, you play the shot, but use this golf club. I think you should use this one. Or, it's a support, a servant who comes alongside, but believes in the wisdom and the resources that the creator themselves have.
Brilliant. I mean, Theron, that's why there's a caddy there. The caddy doesn't swing the golf club. They just make suggestions about which one to use, and they believe the golfer can do, play the shots on their own. Quite right. So they have faith in the wisdom that lies within the other. They trust in the discovery process. In other words, they believe that the creator can discover things as they go, and that'll be good for them, and they'll grow and learn and develop. And they believe in leaving the power with others as they clarify what they want. In other words, it's the empowerment dynamic. They are, instead of enabling a victim to remain a victim and so rescuing them, that's drama, they empower the creator by coaching them. So this is a beautiful thing. You're absolutely right. It's about flipping that drama triangle by taking on a different role. Anything you want to add there, Theron?
No, I think you got it. Let's quickly deal with the challenger before we move on to some other tips of how to.
The challenger role there is very much like that kind of umpire role, just calling the truth, speaking the truth for what they see. And the challenger really just takes on the role of life being about learning and growth, even in the face of not knowing. So they believe that the journey of life is about growing and developing. They see that life is always changing and uncertain, and they have conviction in the confidence of their values. So they have certain values and they're willing to speak those out. And then they also speak the truth about current realities without blame or judgment. So that's critical. Is that there's no blame or judgment. Otherwise, they would then be the role of the persecutor. The challenger is really just someone that without blame or judgment speaks the truth to the reality that they see.
Yeah, if you look at this little icon, it's obviously a tennis umpire. It's nice and high. It's got a vantage point to see what's happening. But you never see the umpire saying, you stupid player, you can't hit the ball in the court. And they just call it as they see it. There's nothing personal in the negative sense. Yeah. They do have a vested interest, though, in the creator, and they are calling the creator through their sort of truth statements, calling the creator to a higher value. So they often say that, they're the one in the room who says what no one else wants to say. So there is a courageousness to the challenger role. And I think the point of this empowerment dynamic is that if someone takes on a role of a victim, we can either step into the role of rescuer or we can step into the role of coach. And if we do that, if we offer that new invitation, we can help the victim to step into the role of creator. So our hope for you as you go through this series and as you journey through Mygrow and are empowered through the emotional and psychological development there and the strengths, the competencies that you're growing with on the Mygrow platform, our hope is that each of us would be able to, in every aspect of our lives, shift out of that victim into a creator role, but not just creator. In the same way that the persecutor and rescuer ultimately end up as victims, well, in this dynamic, the coach and the challenger are also creators themselves. So the hope is that in all our interactions, whether we are the focus of it or someone else is the focus, that we can be playing these different roles in ways that invite each other into upward spirals instead of downward spirals. Give us a little bit... a couple of, unpack for us how we can move towards those healthy relationships and some of the key elements there.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, in terms of moving towards healthy relationships, these two, the empowerment dynamic and drama triangle, help us to analyze what's happening in relationships and to take on certain roles. What it doesn't deal with is how to build the foundation upon which we can stand to maintain the empowerment dynamic. And so just quickly, I want to share just 3 things that I think can be really powerful during this lockdown for people to move towards healthy relationships. So the first is to build emotional intelligence. The second is to create depth of relationships. And the third is to do something called a gratitude visit. And I want to just touch on each of them. And we're going to make these resources available to everybody on this webinar series for free. So just hang tight if we jump through this very quickly. But let's have a look at what it takes to build emotional intelligence. Now, some of you may have seen this model of emotional intelligence. Some of you may not have, but this is the EQI 2.0 model. It just shows you that emotional intelligence is a whole set of skills that together work a little bit like psychological fitness that make you great at managing yourself and interacting with others. So while we've looked at diagnosing relationships through the drama triangle and stepping into a different kind of dynamic through the empowerment dynamic, it's very important to realize that we have to be exercising the muscles of emotional intelligence if we're going to be able to implement that effectively. And your Mygrow subscription that's been given to you for free is going to develop your emotional intelligence competencies. And you can see those different exercises around there. Mygrow is an online gym for emotional intelligence for these competencies. So that's building EQ. Then in terms of creating depth in relationships, we're going to have a look in one of the next webinar series just about social media and how it essentially has started training us away from how to have depth in relationships. And so there's 2 resources that we want to just give to you in terms of being able to really just nurture relationships to a depth that is going to be wonderfully fruitful for you. And there's 2 resources we're going to give you. The one is for any kind of one-on-one relationship you have with someone. There are 36 questions that lead to deepening of relationship. And we're going to make that available as a resource for you. You can literally use these questions in conversation, either online or face-to-face if you're standing with the person, perhaps in your marriage, perhaps in your sibling relationships, or in your if you've got housemates or whatever it is. And then we're going to make a set of questions available for you to have what's called a family dinner. And this is where you essentially draw certain questions out of this list that we'll make available to you. And it prompts conversation around things that build intimacy and relationship for all of you. So go and find that in the extra resources page. And then the last quick thing, Theron, is I would really love it if everybody could go and do a gratitude visit before the end of this lockdown. We're going to make a worksheet available around a gratitude visit. Essentially what it is it is a way of making a time to go and share with someone that's had an important impact on your life the things you are grateful for that they've done in your life, making a plan to go and share that information with them, and then actually sharing it and having that conversation. It's called a gratitude visit. There's wonderful research from Martin Seligman about it that we'll make available to you. And I'm sure we'll probably revisit that in another webinar, Theron. But that's probably the third thing that I would suggest to just build towards healthy relationships in this time.
And of course, when he says gratitude visit, he means via Zoom or Skype or WhatsApp or FaceTime.
Yeah, whatever's possible at this time. Yeah, send a pigeon or something, you know. I mean, I don't know.
Great. Well, it's time to get our guest on for today, Priyadashini Nanjundappa. She was in a previous webinar recently, so you may recognize her. She has a background in social work, but then, of course, she also has a PhD in positive organizational behavior. So who better to join us to talk about how we can impact our relationships? Priya, can you hear me?
Yes, Theron, I can.
Welcome to the show today. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, pleasure. We really enjoyed everything you had to share last time, and looking forward to some more gold from you today. Okay, so you've been listening in. You've heard everything we've shared around the drama triangle and the TED, and just some practical ways that we can invest in our relationships to maybe get rid of that toxicity or that constant drama.
Absolutely.
What advice do you have for us to move towards healthy relating?
Okay. I would like to share two things, Terence. So I've been using and this in our facilitation sessions, the drama triangle, right? And I think a lot of what I'm going to say, Mark has already built on all the premises before. So the first thing what I'm going to be talking about is what you put your attention on expands, or what you put your focus on expands. If you put your focus on drama is what you're going to get. If you put your attention more on empowering, building, that is what is going to get the result. So I would want to share a small theory or just a snippet by Dr. Ryan Namick. He is the director for the VIA character strengths. So he calls something very simple which you can use in your relationship building called as the C approach, SEA approach, C approach. So S very briefly stands for spotting strengths, E stands for explaining about it, and A stands for appreciating it. So let's just quickly give an example for viewers and listeners. How does this
walk us through those three again? S-E-A. Say them again.
S is for spotting.
Spotting
of the
looking,
strengths.
seeing, all right. Okay.
E is explaining.
Explaining.
A is appreciating.
See, explain, appreciate. Okay, great.
Yes.
Carry on.
So how does it play out? Let me give you a corporate example of how does that work out in a workplace, right? Probably I see a call center or a customer agent being very good at giving a customer service over a call. So I might go over there and say, "Hi, Alex. It was great to see that you displayed such good customer service." And not actually stopping saying great job, well done, but I'm going to do more of explaining why do I think she displayed being a great customer service, right? So probably she was more patient, she did not get disabled by the irritant customer, she was listening well. Give all those indicators as to why do you think she displayed that. And appreciating can be about the behavior, and appreciation can be more for the person that actually is. So you have been a great value to the team. You bring such great expertise into our experience or as an organization. So following these things consciously gives us or puts our lens into a more positive frame where we not only consciously look at strengths of people, but we need to do it in a more authentic way of explaining it and appreciating it more as people. So the roles, what Mark and you guys were explaining about creator, coach, and challenger can fit in beautifully here. You create experiences or positive experiences for the people. And we all know we are wired for negativity. Our brain looks for all these negative experiences, but to latch on to positive, you have to have a conscious intention behind it. So that is one way.
As you were saying at the beginning, that the thing you put your attention on or your focus on, it grows. It's like our story we mentioned a couple of episodes back about the two dogs. The one you feed is the one that wins. And just a reminder again to the viewers that for positives to really take root in your subconscious mind, you have to give them airtime. You have to really extend the focus you give to them. So I love this. I love this little technique you've got. SEA. It's more than just giving a compliment. It's giving the compliment, then explaining why it's so great, and then saying personally what you appreciate about it. I mean, that is like feeding that positive dog, to go back to that old story, more and more and more, to give it the chance to win. And then, of course, just giving airtime and giving more and more time for the positives, which to remind everyone, our brain treats positives a bit like Teflon. You know, it'll just wash right off, water off a duck's back, unless we really invest in it and give it the time to soak in and steep in it. I love this. SEA. We'll put a little resource together and put that on the platform for our viewers as well. We've got a couple more minutes. Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
The second one which I wanted to tell the viewers was also about nurturing authentic relationships, being it digital or in person, right? So we have always been complaining of lack of time, and we have been given the time. Let's put into best use. How do you fuel nurturing relationships is art of meaningful conversations, right? We can always start with how are you doing. We are habituated that as a greeting, but asking relevant, meaningful questions so that it enables deeper conversations. For example, I might ask, Theron, how are you taking care of yourself today? Or how did you take care of yourself over the past weekend? That will make you stop and, okay, you need to think back on what have you done to nurture yourself. Right? So I think in the age of texting, WhatsApping, Twitter, minimal characters, we have gotten into short questions where we want quick answers. Let's delve that into more deeper conversations so that we can get to know who the person really is. So that is what is meaning of also authentic relationships. And digital, we need to be very, very grateful for the technology and all the platforms we are having. That is the reason we are all being able to share all with the viewers and listeners today. But we can start doing a more deeper dive into ourselves and to the relationships we have. So that is the second thing that I would want the viewers to focus on, is nurture authentic relationships in and around you. At work, family, social.
That just ties in so nicely to the TED, or to TED, as Mark told us. Because, if we take this idea of roles that we take on, and then when we inhabit that role and live out of that character, we invite others to respond. So I love that idea of actually putting questions out there. Tell me, what are you doing to look after yourself? Because what that does is it invites the other person into a creator role to say, well, this is what I did, and then it helps them process it, and perhaps they'll get better at doing some of those things, or they will realize the value of it and be able to be more intentional about it. These are two really, really good resources. Thank you so much for sharing them with us today.
Thanks, Theron.
Well, Mark, Priya always has such great stuff to say. For me, it's such a testament to the power of this whole field of positive psychology, I think, actually, and having someone who brings that very very authoritative lens is always super helpful. What responses do you have?
No, I just firstly love Priya. Can't wait for the next episode that she's on. Also, I mean, Theron, in terms of nurturing authentic relationships, that's what these resources are all about that we're making available. Those 36 questions, the family questions that we'll put up, and also the gratitude visit. It's not exactly what Priya was saying, but it is very much about nurturing authentic relationships, is those gratitude visits. And I think what we'll do is add in a few questions there, like Priya suggested, that people can start using in their online conversations with their friends and family, so that relationships are just a little bit more authentic in the way they are being nurtured in this time.
Yeah, it reminds me of one of the things we like to do at Mygrow is around our lunches, just to take some time over lunch each day to just meaningfully connect with each other. And I think that's been really at the heart of why we have such great relationships, friendships in our team. And we've tried, we've tried and stumbled a little bit, but we're getting into it even in this digital space now, meeting every day on a hangout at lunch and eating our lunch together and sharing. Any final words from you before we sign off, Mark?
No, just super excited to hear some of the testimonies around how people's relationships are changing by using these resources that are being made available to them. So, exciting times ahead there.
Yeah, so please share with your friends, share with your family, Let your colleagues know if you're finding this helpful. We really are wanting just to get the reach of this to go as broad as possible. Thanks very much, guys. We will see you in the next episode.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Do you need to work effectively with those around you? Do you need to work in teams? Do you need to cope with stressful environments? Do you need to see yourself in a certain way and convey messages to other people? And if the answer to all of those is yes, then I'd say, okay, then get Mygrow.
More than anything, I saw that I was really closed off.
As I've now learned to understand where my anger comes from.
I had the strength to reconcile with my husband.
I'm able to get my point across and say this is the decision I've made and this is why.
It's essential to becoming a good parent because we impart so much on our children.
My children can trust me more, not to freak out on them.
Seeing how my emotions are influencing her.
I can see a better, more positive side.
At home, thanking my husband for a lot more things that I probably wouldn't have.
It's making you aware of how you really interact with individuals.
In my interactions with my parents, my colleagues have definitely deepened and strengthened.
I'm better able to handle stress.
I've learned to be a lot more patient, learned to listen better.
I listen more.
There's a kind of optimism.
Just being fine with who I am, just being confident in that.
I can improve. It's not, oh my word, I'm just forever going to be like this.
And I found that incredibly valuable and energizing.
But I think there's a whole lot more that the working world is asking us to develop employees with, and we're not really sure what that is. The more we look to EQ, the more we'll find our answers.